Cool. So thank you everybody for coming to today's session about customer insight presented by Mark Macrae. But before you start, I just have a few announcements to make. So as some of you might already know, the Build conference is currently taking place in the US. So the first day is just about over, and then the second day is picking up. And there have been some really cool announcements that have been made during those sessions. So I've got a couple of sort of slides in there, or a couple of just get there. So a couple of blogs that were released this morning, actually, or during the night. And both of them are from really high up people in the sort of Microsoft product team. So Greg Lenninghost is principal PM architect, as it says on the screen right there, but he is a mastermind. I've spoken to him, I've heard him present, and he knows a lot about the product, and he's a very technical guy. And basically what he's announcing in here is the usage of PowerFX into model-driven apps, which is a fantastic way of actually lowering, I was just talking to JJ, lowering that sort of entry point for everybody to start using model-driven apps, also citizen developers to start enhancing user experience by using PowerFX. So PowerFX is basically an Excel-like language where you can define automation that happens to enhance user experience and update things on the form, navigate, and do lots of really cool stuff. So it's a low code, if you want, low code, no code, if you want to call it that way, capability that is going into model driven. JavaScript will still be there. So for those of us that are pro dev or senior dev, I don't know what they call them now, and they like the JavaScript, and JavaScript will be maybe sometimes more efficient to use than PowerFX. So both of them will coexist, but it's good to see that introduction in there. The other announcement that Ryan Cunningham did, and Ryan Cunningham is, again, he's director, PM now. So he's sort of high up in the chain, and he leads an entire team. So he has a lot of vision of what the platform might look like. And what he's announcing in here is the usage of natural language to generate PowerFX, to generate queries. This is something that we've seen with Power BI in the past, and I've sort of briefly talked about it in previous sessions. But it's basically you tell the platform what you want. I want to get customer data from Wellington, partition in the last 4 months where X equals something. So it will understand that natural language and it will convert that into a PowerFX query. So basically, again, lowering that entry level to the platform where you don't even have to deal with a complex PowerFX query, but just say in natural language, I want this to happen, and it will generate it for you. And they've got a few examples in here. So as you can see, he's just typing what they need, and then here's the query that is generated for you, and then it will just display it on the screen. So really cool capability. So this is coming from a technology called GPT-3. And that's Microsoft has an exclusive contract with AI people that generate that language to be used in Microsoft languages or platforms. And they've just announced it for the Power Platform, which is really awesome thing to see. Last but not least, before I hand over to Mark, the Power Platform and Dynamics user groups across the globe are now going into a new platform that is provided by Microsoft. So if you go to powerusers.microsoft.com and then have a look at the Power Platform user groups in there, you will be able to find us. So if I go in here, find or join a user group, and I just put in Wellington, Wellington Street, no, Wellington, New Zealand, here we go. And this is our user group. And all it is right now is just a link to the meetup that we've got. And I think the meetup and the user group will coexist. So the community one will coexist. So feel free to join it. There are advantages in terms of joining them, because when you do that, you're going to have access to all the user groups across the globe. So every city in the world is going to be joining that platform, and all their sessions are going to be recorded and then they're going to be archived. So if there's some interesting sessions that is done, for example, in the New York user group, so for example, I think last week, Lynn, who's one of the community, the MVPs in Wellington, presented in New York. He was still in Wellington, but he presented there. His session is going to be recorded and placed and archived and available to view. And again, if there are other bigger events as well, they will be announced in there. So I'll send this information through the meetup for everybody just to know about them and then be able to join. But yeah, it's a great initiative by Microsoft to do that. So yeah, with that, I hand over to Mark. Point the camera at you, and off you go.
Okay. Okay, welcome then everyone, and good afternoon to my presentation on customer insights. So those of you who don't know me, my name is Mark Macrae. I'm a solution architect. I work for Intergen. Been with Intergen for 3 years or so since I came over from the UK. So being from London, well, I'm a football fan, so my team is West Ham United. You'll also hear me say data a lot today rather than data, because I'm British, obviously. But yeah, my interests, apart from this sort of stuff, is mountain biking, football. I'm also into my retro computer games, so anything before 2000 is probably in my bag. So yeah. Cool. So today's agenda, I guess the main takeaway that I hope you're going to get from this presentation is to basically understand when custom insights would be a good fit for your problem or your business, what it can do, and what resources you will need to sort of get the best out of customer insights and get it up and running. So in simple terms, really, there's when you do look into this product, it's a huge product. There's a lot of features and functionality in there, and actually a lot of the resources out there are actually quite abstract in a way. They don't really get to the crux of what it does or show you some real good examples. So I'm hoping that I can sort of give some clarity today to you guys, sort of through my simplification filter, if you like. So we'll start by looking at, I guess, what is a 360 view of a customer. So at the heart of customer insights is really the kind of the single view of what is your customer. So we sort of describe that as like a holistic summary of all the relationships that you might have with your customer across your brand. So if it's Starbucks, it might be the shops and store, it might be the kind of website experience, the apps. If it's government, you're talking about, if you sort of think about the health system, you might be thinking about your engagements in the hospitals with your GPs, whether you're hopping between sort of private healthcare and into the public healthcare. So you've got this kind of journey, if you like, that the customer is going through, and there's lots of touch points along that journey that we're looking to kind of extract and map. We also look at hard and soft data. So hard data is kind of factual stuff that you'd kind of find, let's say, in a CRM contact, so their email address or emails that they've sent in the last 3 weeks or something like that. And soft data is that kind of more abstract feelings, if you like, some sort of the information you'll get from AI bots now. What that kind of, how they're actually feeling when they're talking to you, what's their customer service responses like. So that's kind of that softer data that we're also trying to pull in. You will notice that I've got a picture of a chameleon up there. You might wonder why. That's because that's sort of one animal in the animal kingdom that's got a 360-degree view. They can like rotate their eyes, look back and forward. There's only one other animal in the animal kingdom that comes close to that, and that's my wife. She has a near 360-degree view of what I'm doing. So this kind of, Gartner statement from 2018, fewer than 10% of companies have a true 360-degree view of their customers. And although that's kind of 3 years old or whatever, it's probably, I would say that, from my experience in the sector and working with clients and that it's not far off that even now. So we look into our kind of, how do we map that onto like a system perspective? So you might have your Dynamics 365 sales or customer service or marketing app with some contacts in there, and you've got to see the funky new icon. So the sort of information you might have in there is just sort of that kind of hard factual data, like what's my name, what's my job, what's my email address, phone numbers, that sort of thing. Then you've got your ERP systems, and you've got sort of payment information in there, transactional, shipping details, that kind of thing. Then you've also add to that, you've got your emails and your activities that you can link through Dynamics, obviously. But then you've got sort of, in front of that, you've potentially got web experiences, so analytics coming from your websites or your mobile apps, or your experiences out there when a customer is working or shopping or engaging with your brand. Then you've got at the other end of the spectrum, you've got your sort of voice of customer voice, or your your customer service experience where you're getting their feedback. And then you've got all of that kind of social media information around as well. So people tweeting about their bad experience with particular shop or brand or whatever it might be, or a good experience. And there's all this kind of information that you can tap into to get a real good feel about what the customer's thinking of you. I've got a picture of a bus there because when I was back in Jersey, the island of Jersey, which is like a small island between England and France, I was involved in like quite an early IoT project where we put devices on the bus systems, on the buses, and we just tracked those on a map. So, rather than use the timetable, someone could go onto their app and just see where their bus was. So 5 minutes away. So I used to look at it now when I was getting ready for work, and then I'd see the bus sort of 5 minutes when I'd dash out of the house, that kind of thing. But that sort of data that is also being tapped into. So people are buying devices now like fridges and washing machines, and they're communicating potentially back to the vendors through that as well. So if it's broken down or it needs it needs maintenance or whatever. So all of that really is your kind of 360-degree view. So you sort of think about these sort of questions, what do you know about your customers? And really it's these sort of questions that people, marketeers or analysts spend quite a lot of time, crunching data and trying to work to get to those results. And at the end of the day, trying to come up with plans or marketing strategies to like improve or get the best out of their customers. So if you think about like your IT landscape, there's a lot of systems and components out there that do parts of this. So you've obviously got your Dynamics CRM and your Power Platform environments that hold the customer data. You've got data warehouses, you've got ERP systems, you've got customer voice tapping into customer service, but they're still disparate systems and they hold potentially disparate data sets. So the thing that pulls it all together is Dynamics 365 Customer Insights, and that's really what I'm going to present to you today. So it's kind of just a little background to get to where we what this product is all about. So really there's kind of two parts to Customer Insights. There's something called Audience Insights, which is really shows, kind of combines, gets that single view of your customer and shows who they are and what they're feeling. That part of the product has kind of been around for a couple of years now, and is there's still tweaking it. So as I was sort of going through the trial instance while I was preparing for this, you know, if you look back at the sort of documentation that's on Microsoft, it's not quite aligned. It's because they're really, you know, improving and changing and tweaking the experience of this, you know, sort of even as we speak. The second part is engagement insights. So that's really tapping into, you know, how customers are using your digital channels, so how they're using your websites or your mobile apps. That's something that's quite new. That's like a new part of the product, and I'll show you a little bit about that. But there's actually not a lot of info about that to be able to tap into and get some real concrete examples. But I've got enough to show you a bit of a demo of that. And just to point that I'll be focusing today on like a B2C type scenario, but it does support B2B, so you can tap into like your accounts or your organizations and how you as an organization interact with your the organizations, your suppliers or vendors or whatever. So looking at audience insights, then drilling down into that. So this sort of you know, this card, if you like, that you've got here, that's the sort of output that you're getting from customer insights. So I can see here, you know, your profile, you've got the activity timeline. I'm not just talking activities in Dynamics, you know, like your emails and phone calls and those traditional activities, but we're also blending in, you know, when they've opened emails, when they've browsed your website, when they've been bounced from a website, when their washing machine has come up with an error message to say it needs a bit of a repair. All that sort of thing, you know, from your holistic view is going to tap into this kind of overall timeline. And then you've got some other data in there, which, you know, things like high level measures and data that we're pulling in, market research, if you like, from other, from out there in the world, from other suppliers that align with your data set. And I'll come on to a bit more detail about that shortly. So the map, if you like, of all of this data, you've got like a mix of demographic data, like where they live, their job, that kind of thing. You've got their behaviors, what they're browsing, how they use your website, the transactional data, if you like, the purchases they're making, the complaints they're making. And then you've got this kind of proprietary information as well on top of that. So things like, what about, you know, what's a similar customer doing? You know, what's the research say that customers that match your sort of, I don't know, male 20 to 30-year-olds, what are they doing else outside there? You know, what market research is there? So that's kind of the network and information that we're looking at. So the first step, if you like, in getting to that point is the data unification. So essentially bringing together all of your, you know, all your data sets from all those different systems, pulling it into customer insights, and basically matching those customer records, if you like, or pieces of customers, and matching them up and creating this one profile. And then once you've got that, then looking to enrich that profile, you know, with that kind of periphery data. So if we think about a schematic view of it, you know, you've got all of your different data sets there. There's built-in connectors to connect to those data sets. Then you've got the unification approach. So you're kind of ingesting that data, you're doing some mapping and merging on it, and then you're going to enrich that data as well. You've then able to look at some insights on that. So you've got some reports like Power BI style reports. You've also got the ability to have machine learning and AI across that data to give you additional prompts or additional intelligence to say, hey, did you know you've got this kind of group of customers in your data set that you could leverage, or the kind of, I guess, you know, you could market to in this particular way. And then you've got some action points. So once you've got those insights, you then can take action on that. And there's various ways you can do that. For example, take segments of your customers and import them into Dynamics marketing, and then pass over to your marketing team to do a campaign, something like that. So ingesting data, you've got a variety of different data sets, but there's also kind of 3 different ways that you can ingest data. So the import approach uses Power Query. So with that approach, if any of you use Power Query with Excel or Power BI, you'll know that it's the same approach. So you ingest a set of data, and then you've got a whole kind of ETL model in there available to you so that you can transform that data, you can update the kind of data types on that data and that kind of thing, and have a repeatable transactional ETL process that you can apply. And then there's 2 other data sets. So if you've got some data like in a data lake or something that aligns to the common data model, then you can use a dedicated connector to pull that in. You can't do any ETL with that, but it is like a sort of a more faster connection approach especially for larger data sets. So the import method is sort of smaller data sets or up to 5 million records. But if you've got if you're talking government sort of scale data, then potentially you want to be looking at a common data model approach. And if you're wanting to pull data in from Power App or one of your Dynamics applications, then there's a dedicated Dataverse connection for that. Once you've pulled your data in, you're then going to go through a mapping exercise. And what you're essentially doing here is you're taking your properties. So if you think about a contact in Dynamics, you might call the first name, you might call it, Christian name, you might call it, whatever. So, and really depending on your location or your kind of style, you might call these things different, have different terms for them, and you also might potentially have different data types for them. And what you're really doing here is you're pulling it into the common data model. So this common data model structure, that terms that Microsoft have provided for us through Azure data lakes, and that really have a really kind of common data types and points for every kind of attribute that you might have against that customer. So what that does is that kind of pulls all of your data into this common model that you don't really have to design. It's designed for you. You're just aligning your data to that model. So you do that through this kind of mapping exercise. And then you configure things like search and filtering to allow you through the front end of customer insights to be able to kind of go through and easily filter and find your customers. You're also going to look at activity. So I mentioned before, you've got just things over and above just your standard phone call, email, appointments. You've got all these kind of timestamps and interactions with your web presence, that kind of thing. So what you're going to do here is you're also going to define all those different activity types and align those to a common data model equivalent for activities. So if you think about, we've all been through, if you think about all the different activities in Dynamics CRM, or as was, they all have slightly different dates. And if you've ever tried to get a common report, it's quite difficult to do because an email date is different from an appointment date and so forth. So this kind of allows you to merge all of that together and have a common, common timestamp, if you like, or a common set of activities that are across your customer base. And then you're going to enrich that data. So you've got your data set, got your single data set all nicely pulled in. There's Microsoft have provided what's called brands and interests. So they, through the Microsoft Graph, they've got sort of demographic data, if you like, out there that again, sort of based on market research to say that, hey, someone who aligns with this particular demographic, so it might be a woman in her 40s who lives in a certain place, who has these sort of interests, you know, would align with these brands and interests potentially. So again, you can sort of compare that data, overlay that on top of your own, and get suggestions to say that, you know, this segment of your customer base aligned with this segment. They're really interested in, you know, for example, males who are around about 47 from London who do user group presentations maybe are into alcoholic beverages. So you could pull that segment out, pull that single customer out of your customer insights, and call him up and say, hey, I've got some interesting products for you. And that's quite interesting because there's like a third party hook or supplier relationship into that kind of part of customer insight. So you're starting to get these third party vendors that are offering up their own market research data, if you like, or the ability to take your data and enrich it with, like, you know, address. So say you've got some gaps in your address data, you can enrich all of that with, pass it off to someone else, and they will basically fill out all the gaps for you. So that's sort of another example. Well, there's sort of interesting, some really interesting kind of vendors in that space that are providing information, like Experian, for example, like a UK, US credit database. You know, will be able to give some sort of, you know, additional credit information or some demographical information on top of that. I'll touch on, you know, there's obviously, you know, some people might be thinking data sovereignty and privacy and that in your heads when you start talking about that sort of stuff, which I did, and I'll cover that a little bit at the end. So enough slides for now. I'm going to break out and show you some action. So here is like a tenant that one of the tenants that I spun up that's got quite a few errors on it. But I just wanted to show you, for example, how that kind of data mapping works. So here is my list of data sources. So there is if any of you've done Power Apps in a day, there is a customer insights in a day equivalent to that. So see your kind of, you know, partner, if you like, and get some information about that. But it is a little bit old now. It did come out like a couple of years ago when Customer Insights came out, and some of the functionalities moved on. But essentially, it gives you this kind of example of a coffee manufacturer or a coffee vendor, so Contoso Coffee, and they've got shops and a website presence and that kind of thing. It's similar to like a Starbucks, if you like. So what we've done here, we've brought in some commerce contact data, some loyalty scheme data. I'm just going to show you how to pull in some point of sale data from their point of sale system. So we'll go to add a data source. You can see, let's just clear these. So I'm going to call this Wellington User Group EPOS. They provide you with some links to some sample data. So I'll show you just text-based data, basically. So you don't have to kind of think about providing some data to get some decent sort of, you know, usage or training out of this. So I'm going to pick a text CSV input style. I'm going to put that path to the file in there. You can see you can pull data from on-prem as well. So there is you can hook into an on-prem gateway. And it was all nicely warmed up. So it just shows you a preview of your data, and then you can go into transform it. And those that use Power Query before will be familiar with this interface. It's basically Power Query with inside your customer insights experience. So I can do things like, for example, you can see there that my first row is just headers. So I can just say, yeah, use the first row as headers. You know, it's pulled in data that's just text. So I want to do things like update the data types on these things. So total price would be a currency. Rewards points would be a whole number. And what it's building up on the right hand side there is just a set of steps, and they're the steps it's going to repeat every time it kind of schedules a next update or refresh of your data. So this query that I'm building up here would run continuously in the background and ensure that any new data it pulled in, it would apply the same transformations to. So I would then save that. Would usually give it a better name than query, but that'll do for a demo.
So how often does it refresh the data?
I think it's continuous in the background, but you can I believe set like a time frame as well. Okay. So you can either have it continuous or on a timer. But yeah, I'm not 100% sure on that. So you can see basically here's all my data sets, and you can see that's kind of refreshing at the moment. And what I'll do is I'll flick over to different tenant and just show you that's something that's just been set up. So here's all my data sets. And what I would do then is I would go through the unify process. Just needs a little bit of a refresh. It's gone stale. So I go through the unify process, and here's where you've got your sort of map, match and merge process on here. So you can see, you know, here's my sort of entities. So when it pulls in the data, it's created an entity for each data set. So you can see I've got my e-commerce contacts, which is my contact records from my e-commerce data. I've got potentially my Dynamics 365 contacts in here. I've got my loyalty scheme customers here. And you can see what I'm doing is if I go to my e-commerce contacts, I set the primary key for that, and then I'm aligning on the left-hand side my fields from that data set with those common data model fields on the right-hand side there. Then I would go to like the match phase, and this would then show me, I then specify the order of the data set. So if I've got a particular data set that I'm really confident in, that I know the data is really accurate, I would put that as a higher priority order. So when it's merging these together and it comes up with some conflicts, it's going to take, you know, maybe my dynamic CRM data as my preference. And then I'm going to create some matching rules. So how does it know to match up a dynamic CRM or 365 contact with a customer that's in my point of sale system? And that's where you would create these rules. So you can see if I just edit one of those rules, you know, I sort of align it up. So say on the left-hand side, and what I'm matching up on the right-hand side, and then what confidence level am I okay with? So do I want an exact match, or do I want a kind of a high to medium match? And then, so if, for example, you're matching first names and surnames, you know, and in the data set they're round a different way, this will be intelligent enough to recognize that if you've not said exact match, and you've said, you know, a good enough match, it will recognize that and treat that as the same. And then what you can see in the results, you'll also be able to manage duplicates as well if it finds those. If we go to merge is where you actually then go, right, now I want to sort of run this now and merge all my customers. And that would just give you some results. So if I then go into my entities, you'll be able to see, say, your customer profile. And then you'll be able to see the data that comes through from there. So you'll be able to see sort of, you know, all of the data that you pulled in and just sort of eyeball that and verify that. You can download that if you want to Excel and import this to another system if you wanted to. And then you can also produce some sort of reports on these as well. So this is just like the Power BI engine. So essentially, and again, if you go through the app in a day, it sort of says, okay, fire up an instance of Power BI, and then you can connect to customer insights and build reports off that data. But essentially now that's moved on, and essentially you've got Power BI functionality right inside the product. So you don't essentially need to do that, and you can export these reports from here. So the report that I've built, see if that works now. So yeah, I'm just pulling in things like, you know, mapping where they bought their products from, average web purchase, total club points. Obviously, it's a really rough and ready Power BI report, but you get the idea that you can essentially build these reports directly in here from your data. And if I go to look at the, we talked about the enrichment side of things. So if I look at interests, which I've configured on here, so this has gone away. It's tapped into that interests data that come from the Microsoft Graph. It's taken my customer profiles and mapped across those, and you can see that it's sort of enriched 1.3 thousand of my 5,000 profiles with this sort of data. So if I look at, so this is sort of basically saying, okay, for alcoholic beverages, these are the sort of, this is sort of your customer base are sort of, you know, low, medium, high, very high aligned to those products. So you can see that, you know, being a coffee company, you'd expect them to be aligned with beverages, but it kind of, you know, gives you the idea of what's possible. And if I go to my customers, which is kind of the end result of all of that data unification process, you've got a card here per customer. And if I tap into, say, Richard, that's 20 minutes to go. It just gives me an idea of where I am, because usually I either ramble or I might go on a bit too quickly. But so yeah, if I look at Richard, for example, you can see that, you know, we've got his, you know, standard kind of data. We've got his interactions. We've got those brand affinities up here. Sorry, interest affinities, and some kind of stats. So you can kind of, you know, add to this to really kind of build up that 360 view of your customer. So, you know, you could have your customer voice feedback in here. You could have potentially your sort of, results, sort of, I don't know, think of TripAdvisor and that kind of thing, your kind of reviews, all of that data can kind of really be pulled into here. Okay, I'm just going to flick back to the slides now. So now we've got our unified customer. What do we do next? The next step is usually to create some measures, so some KPIs, if you like, for your business or for a particular customer that maybe you want to align your business with, or just make sure that you're within those KPIs. So things like how many, if you're a thinking of like a web digital company, you might be thinking about subscribers. So you might want to, a KPI that says, what's my churn in subscriptions, or how many subscribers have I got? How much? What's the lifetime spend of a customer? That kind of thing. So you can build those attributes up, those measures, and essentially, track those. And with those measures, you can then build segments within your customer base. So if you've got sort of, high churn set of customers, you can then create that as a segment and then start to analyze why they're, rolling over or leaving your business early, and look into that. When I was prepping for this, I noticed that this functionality has changed quite a lot as well. Like the measure builder that is inside Customer Insights has changed a lot, and I found it very difficult to track against that kind of app in a day for this piece. So I think there's some improvements to come there. In terms of the segments, so think of that as like your marketing lists, if you like. They're sort of sub lists of your customers, quite valuable to a marketer to be able to have that information given to you, and not just based on proactive thought. I want to market to all customers who are based in Wellington. This tool will give you proposed segments to you that you maybe never even thought of, that were high value targets, for example, for your business. And you can also have the ability, like that chart showing there, of overlaps within your segments, or and those kind of insights that you're going to get out of this tool. So in that example there, with the California customers and the high value customers, how many cross over there? So that, again, that's quite valuable when you've got maybe multiple campaigns and you want to kind of get, you've got some good in each, and you want to kind of get to the crux in between. The tools, as I said, will suggest segments to you, and then once you've got this data, you can then export that directly into 365 marketing and start up a customer journey in marketing with that. On top of all of that, you've also got some pre-built AI models which the product provides with you. So there's like, for example, a subscription churn model that comes, and you just align your data to it and it's ready to go. So it's kind of aligned to sort of that sort of digital businesses that are worried about subscriptions or customer lifetime values, that kind of thing. But you've also got the ability to, if you've got an AI model that you're building, or you want to reuse from somewhere else, you can also pull that in and align your data to that. And then there's sort of tapping into Azure Synapse, and that whole piece there, where you can also use that analytical tool within that to kind of dive even deeper. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about engagement insights. So before I kind of maybe show you some more stuff in the product, I'll just take you through what engagement insights is all about. So as I said at the start, this is like a relatively new part of the product, and this really taps into your, say, your website traffic or your mobile app traffic, and understands, gives you like a profile of how the customers are engaging with your presence. So again, it's kind of aimed at a digital presence, not necessarily like a walk into the shop type experience, but something that you can actually get analytics from. So you would, a bit like a Google Analytics in a way. So you'd get that kind of script, you put it onto each page on your website, and customer insights would just start tracking it. And you can analyze customer journeys using some of the insights and tools within that part of the product. And again, you know, create segments through this. So, for example, you might be able to create a marketing segment of people that are, you know, dropping off your homepage of your website, or you can sort of analyze why they might be doing that. Maybe align that with some demographics that you've got in the audience insight aspect. So here's like an example screen of sort of page views of your website, and again, be able to filter those views by segments that you've maybe created before. So this is sort of advertised. I haven't done it in the trial instance that I've got yet, so I didn't get that functionality, but it's certainly something that is coming. And if you think about it, it just gives you, you know, again, just another view of your customers, so how they're interacting with your presence, what are they doing, where are they from, what browsers are they using, what mobile tools are they using. And, you know, kind of my first, I guess my first thoughts about this were, you know, we've already got established web analytics out there, like Google Analytics. Why would I want to use a tool like this, you know, instead of something like that? And then when I went to create a workspace, I saw these two sort of coming soon. So that gives you a flavor as, you know, web analytics is like the first part of this. But if you think about device activity, like IoT devices, and hooking into that and getting analytics about how people are using products at home, or on the bus, for example, or in a factory, whatever it might be, and just get those sort of, you know, insights directly about people using the devices that they've purchased from you. So I thought that was quite interesting. So yeah, I'll do a quick demo of this. So we've got about 12 minutes, yeah. So I'll do 5 minutes to show you, and then I'll wrap up. Okay. So if we look at those segments that we talked about, so I can create new segments either from scratch if I know what I want. So if I want something simple like California customers, I can just build that query myself. There is also previews, and then there's insights. So if I go to my insights, that's where I kind of have got the, you know, the overlap, for example, or the alignments. So this shows me, you know, how many of my customers are both in California and high value. So they cross over the both segments and give me some sort of stats on that. And then I can sort of, you know, filter that by different measures. So maybe filter that by their customer satisfaction ratings. So how many of them are actually like, actually not very satisfied. And although you notice the graph doesn't update, but you get some additional figures down here. And then there's also the other type of chart, which was a differentiator. So this shows you, you know, maybe the differences between two particular segments. And, you know, so this kind of shows how, you know, actually high value customers are actually not that too different to those who live in California, for example. Now, if on the left-hand side here, I've got my two parts of the product. There's kind of audience insights and engagements insights. And if I flick on engagement insights, it takes me to, gives you a bit of a demo instance. So it has some like fictitious kind of web data out there from a Contoso type website, and allows you to kind of see what's possible. So, you know, the sort of usual analytic type stats and things that I can drill down into, you know, where my traffic source come from, what my profiles are like, what devices, etc. And then what you can do is create a workspace, which is for your website. So you can have multiple workspaces if you've got multiple sites, or if you've got a site and a mobile app, for example. And I used my HTML skills and knocked up a website. Okay, so I go to that one. So here's my cool website. So I've got a home page. I click through to a products page, click back to the home page. But I could track that website in here. Just hook it up to customer insights, and then I can sort of track that real-time usage. And it's maybe not quite real-time, but it does flow in. It says data is flowing. It takes a little while, actually. All you can do then is to start to, you know, track those particular profiles, create funnels of data. So like journeys, how many of my products, how many of my customers, for example, who click on the home page, how many of those drill down into the products page, and sort of create those drill down funnels, as they call it, but it's sort of, you know, tracking journeys in your website. So yeah, that's kind of just a very quick overview of engagement insights. And what I'll do is just wrap up the presentation. So the final, I guess, you know, you've got all of this data and then want to take action. So there's a number of different ways you can pull this data into your other systems and take action. I've mentioned, you know, exporting to Dynamics Marketing. You've also got a card add-in for Dynamics, one of your Dynamics apps, so sales, customer service, marketing. Basically enrich your contact form. So there's PCF controls that come with the product with this kind of add-in. So you can add controls onto your form, and there's a control for like a customer insights timeline, or you know, the enrichment tool that I showed you. And once you've aligned the sort of GUIDs, if you like, for your customers with the IDs in your customer insights, then you can pull this data directly into Dynamics, which I thought was quite cool. And there's various other, you know, ways that you can export data and act upon it. There is a piece on this around data security and compliance. So it's compliant to a number of different standards. There is, like, you can bring your own data lake. So whenever I go to a party, I always bring my own data lake. Yeah, there's some built-in governance tools that align with GDPR, and I know that GDPR is sort of, you know, a European based sort of data privacy, but it does align with the New Zealand Privacy Act. And obviously, if you've got a web presence, you're potentially tapping into customers that are based in the EU. So, you know, it's something to be aware of, and there are tools to help you align with that. And GDPR is 3 years old today. I remember when that came out. Again, I was in the UK then. That was all big news. So finally, kind of planning. So just, you know, if you're thinking about this, so price-wise, off-the-shelf pricing, if you like, is about 2,267 per tenant per month. So there are some restrictions on that in terms of how many customers you have. But there's details on Microsoft, so there's a link in the slides to that. You've got to think about the infrastructure. So as well as, you know, you've got a customer insights tenant, if you like, that you're potentially going to need an Azure subscription if you want to take advantage of the AI machine learning stuff. Dynamics 365, Power BI, all those sort of tools all hooking together. The skill set, you can sort of gather from the presentation that it's quite, you really need a data analyst to kind of be working on this and, pulling all of your data in and getting the best out of it. And you also need sort of, SMEs and marketeers around to help you understand the data as well. There's some links there about privacy and sovereignty, and also obviously, the actual data relationships and business objective itself. So you can't just dive in here and start playing around with your data. You've got to have a goal in mind. What do you want to achieve? What's lacking in your business? What do you want to achieve from this tool? I've got some references on the slides as well, and that wraps us up. So yeah, there's a lot of you can tell, like, probably from the presentation, it's like a huge product, and there's a lot in there, and it kind of has you branching off into all sorts of directions. So it's like, a myriad of information to try and get a hold of. But it's an interesting product and something that is actively being improved as we speak. So yeah, hope you enjoyed that, and yeah, that's it from me.
I've got a few questions, actually. So you mentioned data sovereignty. So is the processing happening at the Australian data centers or close to where your Dynamics instance is, or like you get to choose where it is?
Yeah, so you get to choose where your data, because it essentially is a data lake behind it. So you get to choose where that is. So Australian option, there are Australian options for that. And yeah, essentially you would align it with where your line of business data is.
Yeah.
There are some exceptions. So if you are looking to enrich your data, or you're looking to set it off, for AI and that kind of thing, especially if you're using some of the out-of-the-box Microsoft. So let me just get rid of that. Out-of-the-box models, then potentially your data is going to go outside of that region. So there is disclaimers to tell you that might happen, and therefore you need to kind of accept that. So that that's something to be aware of.
Yeah. So does that happen, for example, if you want? You talked about hard data and soft data in the beginning. If you want to get some sentiment analysis on emails coming in, or maybe conversations that are recorded, is that the potential where it might go somewhere else with processing?
Yeah. So but you can choose. So that would go through like a cognitive Azure Cognitive Services or something instance. But you get to choose kind of where that would be. So you can hook into your own Azure subscription, go through that, use your own tools within your own region for that. It's more when you're using the sort of third-party enrichment tools like the brand affinities and the address updates. So if there's a address company that will take your addresses and they'll format them and fill them in and fill in all the gaps and send it back to you. So it's that kind of service that potentially is going to go out to the US or whatever.
The licensing cost, is it for unlimited environment or applications, or the?
Yeah, so it's per tenant.
Per tenant.
And there's a limit on the number of customer profiles. So it's something like 100,000 customer profiles. And then if you're beyond that, then there's sort of top up pricing for that. So if it was sort of if a large government agency were looking to adopt this, then potentially, they would be looking at sort of different licensing. But the licensing is subject to the sort of enterprise agreements and government agreements that are in place as well. So I spoke to Casey about this last week, and she was saying, that would potentially be subject to like cheaper licensing.
Any other questions?
What's the uptake been like around?
It's it's not something that I mean, Integin, for example, offer some like off-the-shelf kind of offerings to kind of 3, 5, 7 day offerings where we'll come in and do a startup. But it's to be honest, not something that I've been actively involved in. So I've kind of personally been involved in 2 long-term projects. So this is something actually that I've kind of been tapping into on the fringes and not actively kind of been part of. So probably comment on that, but certainly find out some information. Yeah, I mean, but in terms of like the Wellington practice at Ingesting, for example, I can say that we haven't had any recent demand for this, and I think it's just awareness more than anything. I think it's sort of the market's not really aware that this is a thing, and how it's also quite complex to get your head around. So I think first thing is like simplifying it, trying to find a reason for it as well before people start inquiring about it.
Yeah. So for people that want to get their hands dirty, what's the best place to start? I've noticed you did sort of app in a day or customer insight in a day.
Yeah. So if you are a partner, you can go to your sort of partner resources and get hold of the app in a day links. So they'll download a series of labs and data sets for you to play around with. So I definitely recommend that. Obviously, if you're not a partner, then get in contact with one of the partners and get that information from them. They can potentially hold like courses for you, facilitate it. There is, if you've heard of something called CDX, so there's you go to Google Microsoft CDX. Basically, there's like a series of ready-built demos and presentation scripts and things like that. And customer insights is their part of that. There's not the whole dynamic suite in there, but customer insights is. I did go to that, so I thought, I'll just go bring up a CDX environment for this and follow that for the presentation. But actually, it's not. It's quite limited. But it's still a starting point, a learning point. I think they're the 2 best resources to kind of get stuck into it and understand what it can do.
Yep. We've got a question online from Chris Ban. He's asking, not sure why this was not embedded with Power BI. Any thoughts? Paying to sell another console to clients or end users?
So in terms of embedded in Power BI, I mean, I sort of presented the reports that were embedded into customer insights. So that's sort of embedded Power BI functionality, if you like. You could tell it's got the same kind of visualizations and functionality. But you can still, there is still the ability to, from your Power BI tenant to connect to customer insights and do visualizations within Power BI. And then push those out to your users through dashboards or whatever.
Because you did mention it's in a data lake, so you can tap into that data lake and then report on that data.
Yeah, it's pretty, and the app in the day course does show you a module of how to do that.
Okay.
So I was looking into that and then I noticed the reports and I thought, obviously they pulled some of that functionality directly in as well into here. But yeah, I kind of see my feeling is that you'll have a small subset of users, building and analyzing data in here, but then pushing it out to the likes of Power BI or Dynamics through that card, so that the masses can come in and benefit from that. So I don't see this as being a high usage tool or high volume user tool. It's something sort of a niche tool that would be in your sort of data analytics or marketing area, and then pushing that out elsewhere.
The question from us is there a limit on the amount of data sources you can use to actually bring into customer insights?
Not that I've found.
So limitations more around customers.
Limitations on the volume of data that you can pull in through that data source. So with that import Power BI, Power Query style import, there was a limit on like 7 million rows or something, which I think is a Power Query limitation rather than a product. So, if you've got large data sets like data lakes, or you've got Dataverse information, then use the built-in connectors for those. And then I haven't not aware of any limitations.
Sounds good. All right. Well, thank you very much, Mark.
Yeah, that's all right. Thank you.
I was going to say there is a limitation to the number of
Probably the most
segments.
Popular of the year. So I probably should give you an award or something.
Hopefully, yes, it's popular afterwards. Nothing's going away going, oh, that was like a load of rubbish.
No, it was really good. I'm going to stop the recording and thank you everybody